On my daughter's wedding anniversary, she told me, "Mom, stay away. This moment isn't about you." But it was me her husband thanked out loud for raising the woman of his life. "Your presence here means so much to me. Watch until the end and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has reached." At my daughter's wedding anniversary, she said to me, "Mom, stay away. This moment isn't about you." But it was me her husband thanked out loud for raising the woman of his life. I stood there, glass of champagne trembling in my hand, trying to process Melissa's words. The cold detachment in her blue eyes she inherited from me, felt like a physical blow. For a woman of 68, I'd weathered many storms, but nothing quite cuts like the rejection of your own child. The ballroom at the Westlake Country Club sparkled with expensive decorations for their 5th anniversary. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements, the kind of luxury I could never provide during Melissa's childhood. "Everyone's watching you hover," Melissa whispered sharply when I approached to congratulate her. "This is my special night with Thomas. Everything doesn't have to be about you for once." I stepped back, the smile frozen on my face. "I just wanted to mingle with the other guests, please." She turned away, her designer dress swishing as she greeted a couple I didn't recognize. Decades of raising her alone after Richard walked out flashed through my mind. The double shifts at the hospital, the parent-teacher conferences I attended still wearing my nurse's scrubs, the college tuition I somehow managed by taking on extra weekend work. All those years it had never been about me. I retreated to the periphery of the room, taking a seat at an empty table near the back. My navy blue dress, the nicest one I owned, bought specially for this occasion, suddenly felt inadequate among the designer outfits surrounding me. When dinner concluded, Thomas, my son-in-law, rose to make a speech. Tall and distinguished in his tailored suit, he commanded the room with the easy confidence of someone born into privilege. "5 years ago, I married the most extraordinary woman," he began, gazing at Melissa with genuine adoration. "But tonight, I want to take a moment to thank someone else." Melissa's smile faltered slightly. "Barbara," Thomas said, looking directly at me in my corner, "I want to thank you for raising the incredible woman who became my wife." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. As many of you know, Barbara raised Melissa single-handedly, working countless hours as a nurse to provide everything her daughter needed. What you might not know is that she never missed a school play, never forgot a birthday, and somehow managed to put Melissa through college on a nurse's salary. Tears welled in my eyes. How did Thomas know these details? Melissa certainly never acknowledged them. The strength, resilience, and compassion I love in my wife, those qualities came from somewhere. Thomas raised his glass in my direction. "Barbara, Melissa is your masterpiece. Thank you for the woman you raised." The applause was thunderous. Through blurry eyes, I saw guests turning to smile at me, some raising their glasses. Everyone except Melissa, whose face had hardened into a mask of controlled anger. Later, as guests mingled and danced, Thomas approached my table. "I meant every word," he said, taking the seat beside me. "Thank you," I replied, my voice still unsteady. "But Melissa doesn't seem to share your appreciation." Thomas sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "She's complicated. But I see you, Barbara. I see what you did for her." Before he could say more, Melissa appeared behind him, her smile tight. "The Hendersons are asking for you, darling," she said, placing a possessive hand on his shoulder. Her eyes flicked to me, cold and dismissive. "Mother, I believe the car service is ready whenever you'd like to leave." It wasn't even 9 o'clock. That night, alone in my modest apartment, I stared at the wedding photo of Melissa and Thomas on my nightstand. The daughter who now moved in social circles far removed from her origins. The daughter who seemed embarrassed by my presence at her anniversary celebration. My phone buzzed with a text message from Thomas. "Sorry about tonight. She doesn't mean it. She's just under pressure with these social events." A second message followed. "Thank you again, Barbara. For everything." I placed the phone down and gazed at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The lines on my face told the story of years spent giving everything to a daughter who now wanted nothing to do with me. Where had I gone wrong? Or had I always been just a stepping stone for Melissa's ascent to a life she deemed better than the one I could provide? I wiped away a single tear. At 68, I was too old and too tired to pretend this didn't break my heart. But I was also too proud to let Melissa see how deeply her rejection wounded me. Tomorrow, I would call her as if nothing had happened. I would continue loving her unconditionally. Because that's what mothers do, even when their children push them away. 3 days after the anniversary party, I still hadn't heard from Melissa. Each time my phone rang, my heart leaped with hope, only to sink when I saw it wasn't her. I was watering my small collection of houseplants when a knock at the door startled me. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be Melissa, coming to explain her behavior. Instead, I opened the door to find Thomas standing there, looking slightly uncomfortable in casual clothes. "Thomas, this is unexpected," I said, suddenly conscious of my simple sweatpants and faded cardigan. "I hope I'm not intruding, Barbara." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." We both knew that was unlikely. My apartment building in East Haven was nowhere near the upscale West Side community where he and Melissa lived. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, ushering him into my small living room. "That would be nice, thank you." While I busied myself in the kitchen, I could hear Thomas moving around the living room. When I returned with 2 mugs, I found him examining the photos on my mantel, mostly of Melissa through the years. "She was such a happy child," he remarked, pointing to a photo of 5-year-old Melissa beaming with a missing front tooth, clutching a science fair ribbon. "Yes, she was," I said, handing him a mug. "Before she started to resent me." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Thomas looked at me with surprise, then understanding. "When did it start?" he asked gently. I sank into my worn armchair. "Melissa was 8 when Richard left us. He just disappeared one day. Left a note saying he wasn't cut out for family life." The memory still stung, even after all these years. I had to work double shifts to keep us afloat. Melissa spent a lot of time with a neighbor after school. Thomas nodded, encouraging me to continue. By her teenage years, she'd constructed this narrative that I chose work over her, that I wasn't there enough. I took a sip of coffee, trying to control the tremor in my voice. She didn't understand that I was working to keep a roof over our heads, to save for her education. "Did she ever reconnect with her father?" Thomas asked carefully. "Richard tried to re-enter her life when she was in college. By then he'd remarried, had 2 more children." I laughed bitterly. And somehow, in Melissa's mind, he became the good parent, the one who would have been there. If only I hadn't driven him away. Thomas frowned. "That's not fair. Life rarely is." I gazed at the photos of Melissa's evolution. From gap-toothed child to serious teenager to poised young woman. When she got her scholarship to Briarwood University, she entered a different world. Her roommate came from money. New friends with trust funds and summer homes. Decide. That's when she really started to pull away. "And when she met me," Thomas added quietly. "Yes." I met his eyes. "No offense, Thomas, but your family's social standing was very appealing to Melissa." He didn't seem offended. "You know, my parents pointed that out when we first started dating." He set his mug down. "But I loved her determination, her drive. She told me how hard she had worked for everything in her life." I couldn't help the sad smile that formed. Yes, she worked hard. But she didn't do it alone, though she seems to have revised that part of her history. Thomas leaned forward. "Barbara, there's something you should know." He hesitated. "Melissa tells people a different version of her childhood. In her stories, she practically raised herself while you... Well, while I what?" I prompted, though I already suspected the answer. "While you dated a series of men, spent money on yourself instead of her, chose your social life over her needs." He couldn't quite meet my eyes. I knew it didn't add up. The woman she described couldn't have put her through college or maintained the stable home I saw in all these photos. The room seemed to tilt around me. All these years, I'd known Melissa was distant, resentful. But I'd never imagined she was actively rewriting our history, painting me as the villain. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because it's not right," Thomas said firmly. "And because I think I understand why she does it." He gestured around my modest apartment. "Melissa is desperate to belong in our social circle. She thinks her real background would make her an outsider." The realization was like a physical pain in my chest. My daughter was ashamed of me. Ashamed of our life together. Ashamed of everything I'd sacrificed to give her opportunities. "Does she know you're here?" "Yes." Thomas shook his head. "She thinks I'm at the gym." He leaned closer. "Barbara, I want you to know that I see the truth. I see what you did for her." As he rose to leave, he placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Don't give up on her. Beneath all this insecurity and social climbing, the daughter you raised is still in there somewhere." After Thomas left, I sat alone, surrounded by the evidence of a life devoted to my daughter. The school art projects I'd carefully preserved. The photos documenting each milestone. The small, affordable gifts I'd managed to give her on each birthday, sacrificing my own needs. Had I been such a terrible mother? Or was Melissa's rejection rooted in something else entirely? Her own shame about where she came from. I picked up the phone, my finger hovering over Melissa's number. What would I even say? Confront her with what Thomas had revealed? Demand to know why she'd twisted our past into something unrecognizable? Instead, I set the phone down. The truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of pushing her even further away. Afraid of having her confirm what I now suspected. That she wished she'd been born to different parents, a different life. And in that moment, I realized the depth of the pain I'd been carrying all these years. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt. It was knowing that all my love, all my sacrifice, had somehow not been enough to overcome my daughter's shame about where she came from. 2 weeks passed after Thomas's unexpected visit. I tried to maintain my routine. Volunteering at the senior center on Tuesdays, tending to my small garden on the balcony, meeting my friend Diane for coffee on Fridays. But my mind constantly returned to what Thomas had revealed. The stories Melissa had been telling. The mother she had invented to replace me. I was sorting through old photo albums when my phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen, sending my heart racing. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mother." Her tone was clipped, businesslike. "I'm calling about Thanksgiving. Thomas's parents are hosting at their lake house this year." I waited, expecting an invitation that didn't come. "We thought it would be best if you didn't join us this time," she continued. "The Blackwells are very traditional, and they prefer intimate family gatherings." The implication was clear. I wasn't considered family. "I see," I managed to say, gripping the phone tighter. "And what should I tell people when they ask about my Thanksgiving plans?" "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." There was an edge to her voice, almost accusatory. After we hung up, I sat with a photo album open on my lap. It was filled with holiday pictures. Melissa opening Christmas presents, our small Thanksgiving dinners over the years, just the two of us with our modest feast. I had always tried to make holidays special, even when money was tight. My doorbell rang, startling me from my memories. I opened it to find Diane standing there, concern etched on her face. "You missed coffee," she said. "That's not like you, Barbara." I glanced at my watch, shocked to see it was already past noon. "I'm sorry, I lost track of time." Diane stepped inside, her sharp eyes taking in the photo albums scattered around. "Memory lane." Something like that. I closed the album on my lap. Melissa called. "I've been uninvited from Thanksgiving." Diane's expression hardened. She'd known me for decades, had watched me raise Melissa single-handedly. "That girl," she muttered, shaking her head. I ran into Helen Porter last week. Her daughter is in that same social circle as Melissa. My stomach tightened. What did she say? Diane sat beside me, placing a hand over mine. Barbara, I'm only telling you this because you deserve to know. Helen said Melissa was at some charity luncheon, telling people about her difficult childhood, with a mother who was barely present. Diane's voice softened. She's been painting herself as some kind of Cinderella story. Though Thomas had warned me, hearing it confirmed by someone else made it real in a way that cut deep. Did Helen believe her? Of course not. Anyone who knew you back then knows what you sacrificed for that girl. Diane squeezed my hand. But these new friends of hers, these society women, they don't know the truth. I closed my eyes, memories washing over me. The night Melissa had a high fever, and I'd stayed up all night bathing her forehead with cool cloths. The time I'd sewn her Halloween costume by hand because we couldn't afford the store-bought one she wanted. The countless school lunches packed, homework sessions supervised, tears wiped away. Why would she do this? I whispered. Some people reinvent themselves when they enter a new world, Diane said gently. She probably thinks her real story isn't good enough. The truth hit me with sudden clarity. She's ashamed of me. No, Barbara. She's ashamed of herself. Of where she came from. Diane's voice was firm. That's very different. Later that evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner for myself, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Can you meet tomorrow? Need to talk. Important. We arranged to meet at a small cafe across town, where there was little chance of running into anyone from Melissa's social circle. Thomas was already there when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee. His expression troubled. Thank you for coming, he said, standing to pull out my chair. Is everything all right? Is Melissa okay? Despite everything, my first concern was still for my daughter. She's fine. Physically, at least. He sighed heavily. Barbara, there's something you need to know. Melissa is telling people you won't be at Thanksgiving because you're going on a cruise with a new boyfriend. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. I don't have a boyfriend. And I certainly can't afford a cruise. I know that, he said quietly. But it fits the narrative she's created. The self-centered mother who prioritizes her social life. Anger flared within me, hot and sudden. Why are you telling me this, Thomas? What do you expect me to do with this information? He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Because I love your daughter, but I can't stand what she's doing. These lies. They're not just hurting you. They're hurting her too. He hesitated. And it's affecting our marriage. I can't respect someone who would rewrite history this way. For the first time, I realized Thomas wasn't just being kind to his mother-in-law. He was genuinely disturbed by Melissa's behavior. Have you confronted her? Yes. I've tried. She gets defensive, changes the subject. He ran a hand through his hair. Barbara, I think you need to talk to her. Really talk to her. This can't continue. I thought about all the times I tried to bridge the gap between us, only to have Melissa pull further away. She doesn't want to hear anything I have to say. Maybe not, Thomas conceded. But sometimes the truth needs to be spoken, even if the other person isn't ready to hear it. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange mixture of pain and resolve. For years, I'd accepted Melissa's coldness, her distance, believing that maintaining peace was worth my silence. But now I understood that my silence had allowed a false narrative to grow. One that diminished not just me, but everything we had been through together. It was time for the truth, whether Melissa was ready for it or not. I rehearsed what I would say to Melissa countless times over the next few days. Each version started confidently, but inevitably dissolved into hurt and accusation in my mind. How do you tell your child that you know she's ashamed of you? That she's been lying about the life you built together? Finally, I decided to simply show up at her home. No warning. No chance for her to prepare her defenses or make excuses about being too busy. Melissa and Thomas lived in a sprawling Tudor-style house in Oakwood Heights, the kind of neighborhood I used to drive through when she was little, pointing out the beautiful homes and telling her she could live anywhere she dreamed if she studied hard. The irony wasn't lost on me. I parked my 10-year-old sedan on the street, feeling conspicuous among the luxury cars. The front door was answered by a young woman in a uniform. Their housekeeper, I realized with a start. "I'm here to see Melissa," I said. "I'm her mother." The woman's eyes widened slightly before she composed her expression. "One moment, please." While waiting in the grand foyer, I examined the framed photographs on the wall. There were several of Thomas with his parents at various social functions. Photos of Melissa and Thomas on their wedding day, on vacations at pristine beaches and ski resorts. Not a single picture included me. "Mother." Melissa's voice was sharp with surprise as she descended the staircase. She wore yoga pants and an expensive-looking sweater. Her hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said simply. She glanced toward the door as if checking for witnesses. "You should have called first. I have plans today." "This won't take long." Kept my voice steady. "Is Thomas home?" "No, he's golfing." She hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. We can talk in the sunroom." I followed her through the house, taking in the marble countertops, crystal chandeliers, and carefully curated artwork. Everything screamed wealth and careful social positioning. The sunroom was filled with light, overlooking an immaculate garden. Melissa gestured to a chair but remained standing herself, arms crossed. "What's so urgent that you needed to show up unannounced?" I took a deep breath. "I know what you've been telling people about me. About your childhood." Her face remained impassive, but a slight flush crept up her neck. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," I said gently. "The neglectful mother. The boyfriends. The claim that you raised yourself. The latest story about me skipping Thanksgiving for a cruise with a boyfriend who doesn't exist." She blinked rapidly. "Who told you that?" "Thomas." Her voice hardened. "He had no right to. He's concerned about you. So am I." I leaned forward. "Melissa, why? Why create these stories? You had a good childhood. We didn't have much, but you were loved. You were safe. You were cared for." She laughed, a brittle sound. "A good childhood. Do you know what it was like being the only kid at school whose mother couldn't afford to buy them new clothes? Who had to wear hand-me-downs from church donations? Who never went on vacations because their mother was always working? I was working to support us," I said, the familiar defense rising automatically. "Your father left us with nothing." "And whose fault was that?" she snapped. The accusation hung in the air between us. After all these years, we had finally reached the heart of her resentment. "Is that what you believe?" I asked quietly. "That I drove your father away?" "He told me enough," she said, her chin lifting defiantly. "When I reconnected with him in college, he told me how controlling you were, how you pushed and pushed until he couldn't take it anymore." I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the pain of this new betrayal. Richard hadn't just abandoned us. He'd poisoned our daughter against me. "Your father left because he was having an affair with his secretary," I said flatly. "He emptied our joint savings account and disappeared. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you from the truth about the man you idolized." Melissa's composure faltered. "You're lying. I have the divorce papers, the bank statements, the letter he left." I met her gaze steadily. "I didn't hide these things to deceive you. I hid them to shield you from pain." "I don't believe you," she whispered, but doubt had crept into her voice. "Why would I lie now, after all these years?" I stood up, closing the distance between us. "Melissa, I've never asked you for anything. I didn't ask for gratitude when I worked double shifts to put food on the table. I didn't ask for recognition when I sat up nights helping with your homework after being on my feet for 12 hours. I didn't ask for acknowledgement when I took out a second mortgage on our small house to help pay for your college expenses that the scholarship didn't cover." Tears welled in my eyes despite my determination to remain composed. "But I am asking you now to stop lying about our life together. If you're ashamed of your background, that's your burden to bear. But don't rewrite history to make me the villain of your story. Melissa's face had gone pale. You don't understand. These people, Thomas's family, their friends. They all come from generations of wealth and privilege. My background would make me an outsider. And what does Thomas think about that? Her eyes flickered away. He wouldn't understand. He's never had to worry about fitting in. I think you underestimate him, I said softly. Before she could respond, we heard the front door open, followed by Thomas's voice calling out a greeting. Melissa tensed visibly. Please don't say anything, she whispered urgently. Please. Thomas appeared in the doorway, surprise registering on his face when he saw me. Barbara, I didn't know you were visiting today. It was an impromptu decision, I said, summoning a smile. Just catching up with my daughter. His gaze moved between us, clearly sensing the tension. Everything okay? I looked at Melissa, her face a mask of barely contained panic. In that moment, I realized that pushing further today would only drive her to more desperate lies. The truth needed time to sink in. Everything's fine, I said finally. I was just leaving. As Thomas walked me to the door, he murmured, Did you talk to her? He nodded. It's a start. Driving home, I felt oddly lighter despite the painful confrontation. For years, I'd carried the weight of Melissa's unexplained rejection, blaming myself, wondering what I had done wrong. Now I understood that the roots of her behavior went deeper than I had imagined. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. It was Thomas. She's been crying since you left, he said without preamble. What happened? The truth happened, I replied quietly. It was long overdue. That night, I dug out the old box of divorce papers and Richard's abandonment letter. I had kept them all these years, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of what I had overcome. Perhaps now they could serve another purpose. Helping my daughter understand the reality of her past, and maybe, just maybe, find a way back to me. A week passed after my confrontation with Melissa. And two. The silence between us stretched like a chasm, growing wider with each passing day. I tried calling once, but the call went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What more was there to say? Thanksgiving arrived cold and gray. As promised, I wasn't invited to the Blackwell's Lake House celebration. Instead, I accepted Diane's invitation to join her small gathering of friends, mostly other women in their 60s and 70s, some widowed, some divorced, all with complicated family stories of their own. Any word from Melissa? Diane asked as we washed dishes after dinner. I shook my head. Not since our discussion. Give her time, Diane said, squeezing my shoulder. Some truths take a while to digest. That evening, alone in my apartment, I found myself facing the question I'd been avoiding. What if Melissa never came around? What if this estrangement became permanent? The thought had always been too painful to consider, but now I forced myself to look it squarely in the face. Who was I without the identity of Melissa's mother? Who could I be if I stopped putting my life on hold, waiting for her acceptance? The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If Melissa needed time and space, I would give it to her. But I wouldn't put my own life on pause anymore. I opened a drawer in my bedroom, pulling out a worn leather case I hadn't touched in decades. Inside was my old Canon camera, a gift I'd bought myself when Melissa started school, before Richard left. Photography had been my passion once, abandoned when the demands of single motherhood consumed all my time and energy. The camera was outdated now, but it still worked. That afternoon, I took it to the park near my apartment, capturing the late autumn light filtering through nearly bare branches, the last stubborn leaves clinging to life. It felt rusty at first, this old joy. But by the time I returned home, my cheeks flushed from the cold and my memory card full of images, something had shifted inside me. A door long closed had creaked open. The following week, I signed up for a digital photography class at the community center. The instructor, Elena, was probably half my age, but her enthusiasm was contagious. When she complimented one of my practice shots, calling it evocative, the praise warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. I began to establish a new routine. Photography class on Mondays. Volunteering at the senior center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Coffee with Diane on Fridays. I joined a walking group that met on Wednesday mornings, discovering parts of the city I'd never explored despite living here for decades. Christmas approached, another holiday that would likely pass without Melissa. In previous years, I'd spent weeks agonizing over it, leaving hopeful messages, sending cards and gifts that received only perfunctory acknowledgement. This year I decided to do something different. I booked a 3-day photography workshop in Vermont. The small inn was decorated for the holidays. Snow blanketed the countryside, and the group of fellow photography enthusiasts welcomed me without questions or judgment. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of rejection lift, if only temporarily. I was packing to return home when my phone rang. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. "Barbara." His voice sounded strained. "Are you in town?" "I'm actually in Vermont," I replied. "A photography workshop. Is everything okay?" Melissa found the divorce papers. "The ones you mentioned." Another hesitation. "She's not taking it well." My heart sank. What happened? She went to confront her father. Didn't go as she expected. He denied everything, then when she pressed him, he laughed it off. Said you'd always been dramatic. Thomas's voice hardened. She came home devastated. She's been locked in the guest room for hours. I closed my eyes, picturing Melissa facing the collapse of the pedestal she'd placed Richard on. "I'll come back immediately." "No," Thomas said quickly. "She's not ready to see you yet. I thought you should know what's happening." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my joy from the workshop evaporating. Part of me wanted to rush back, to comfort my daughter as I had when she was small. Another part recognized that Melissa needed to process this truth on her own terms. In the end, I stayed for the final day of the workshop, capturing the winter sunrise over snow-covered hills. The photographs I took that morning were among my best. There was something about the quality of light, the way it illuminated the landscape while still preserving shadows, that spoke to the complexity of truth and perception. When I returned home, there was a small package waiting for me. Inside was a silver-framed photo of Melissa as a toddler, laughing as I pushed her on a swing. I recognized it as one of the photos that had been in my albums. A small note accompanied it. "I found this while looking for a holiday photo for the mantle." Thomas hadn't written that he'd actually put the photo on their mantle, but the implication was clear. He was making a statement, to Melissa, to her social circle, to anyone who visited their home. That I existed. That I mattered. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. As December turned to January, I continued building my new life. I submitted some of my photographs to a small local exhibition for amateur photographers. To my surprise, 2 were accepted. I joined a book club. I reconnected with old nursing colleagues. I still thought of Melissa daily. Still checked my phone for missed calls or texts. Still felt the ache of her absence. But gradually, the pain became something I carried with me rather than something that defined me. I was Barbara Taylor first, Melissa's estranged mother second. One snowy evening in late January, I was returning from a book club meeting when I spotted a familiar car parked in front of my apartment building. My steps faltered. I'd know that silver BMW anywhere. It was Thomas's. I approached slowly, unsure what to expect. Then I saw her, standing in the building entrance, bundled in a camel-colored coat, her breath visible in the cold air. Melissa had come to see me. For a moment, we simply stared at each other through the gently falling snow. Melissa looked thinner than when I'd last seen her, with dark circles under her eyes. Her usual perfect composure was noticeably absent. "I wasn't sure you'd be home," she said finally, her voice small against the quiet evening. "Book club," I replied, holding up the novel in my gloved hand. "We meet every other Thursday." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Perhaps at the realization that I had a life she knew nothing about. Can we talk? She asked, gesturing vaguely toward my apartment. I nodded, leading the way inside. The silence in the elevator was heavy with unspoken words. Once in my apartment, I busied myself making tea, a ritual that had always calmed me. Melissa stood awkwardly in the living room, taking in the changes since her last visit months ago. You've redecorated, she observed, noting the new photographs on the walls. My own work from recent months. Just a few updates. I handed her a steaming mug. You can sit down, you know. This is still your home too, whenever you want it to be. She perched on the edge of the sofa, cradling the tea in both hands. Dad's getting remarried, she said abruptly. To a woman my age. I absorbed this information carefully. I see. After I confronted him about the divorce papers, about what really happened, her voice trailed off. He didn't even try very hard to deny it. Just said it was ancient history, and that I should stop dwelling in the past. She laughed bitterly. Then last week, he called to tell me about his engagement. Like I should be happy for him. I sat beside her, not too close. I'm sorry, Melissa. I never wanted you to be hurt by the truth. That's why you never told me. It wasn't a question. You let me believe a lie because the truth was too painful. I let you have the father you needed, even if he wasn't the father you deserved, I said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. While I was making you the villain of my story. You were a child trying to make sense of abandonment, I said. And later, a young woman trying to fit into a world very different from the one you grew up in. Melissa set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. There's something else you should know. Thomas and we're having problems. Serious ones. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it despite everything. He says he doesn't know who I am anymore. That the woman he married wouldn't be ashamed of where she came from. She looked down at her hands. He says I've become exactly like the socialites I used to mock when we first met. I waited, sensing there was more. We had a huge fight after the holidays. He invited you to Christmas dinner without telling me. Her eyes flickered to mine. When I found out, I said some things I shouldn't have said. Like what? Asked gently. That I didn't want my children growing up influenced by your values. She could barely meet my gaze. I meant your lack of ambition, your contentment with this simple life. But Thomas took it differently. He thought I was ashamed of you because you weren't wealthy or sophisticated. Weren't you? The question came out before I could stop it. Melissa's face crumpled. Yes, she whispered. God, Mom, I've been so awful to you. How can you even stand to look at me? The sound of Mom, not mother, but the warmer, more intimate mom she'd used as a child, broke something open inside me. Because you're my daughter, I said simply. That's never changed. She began to cry in earnest then, deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from a place long buried. I moved closer, placing my hand on her back as I had when she was small. She didn't pull away. I don't know how to fix this, she said when the worst of the tears had subsided. With Thomas. With you. With myself. Start with the truth, I suggested. It's all any of us can do. We talked for hours that night. Really talked, in a way we hadn't since she was a teenager. Melissa told me about the pressure she'd felt to fit in with Thomas's social circle, how she'd gradually constructed a different identity, a different past. How the lies had started small but grew until she could barely remember what was real and what wasn't. I think I need help, she admitted as midnight approached. Professional help. That shows strength, not weakness, I assured her. Before she left, Melissa paused at the door. Would you be willing to meet with Thomas and me? Maybe for dinner next week. He wants to try to work things out, and I think having you there might help. Of course, I said, surprised but touched by the request. As promised, we met the following Friday at a quiet restaurant. Not one of the trendy, exclusive places Melissa usually preferred, but a small Italian bistro with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Thomas greeted me with a warm hug. Melissa's embrace was more tentative, but it was the first she'd initiated in years. Over pasta and wine, Melissa did something I never expected. She told the truth. Not just to me but to herself. "I've spent so long trying to be someone else that I lost sight of who I really am," she admitted. "I was so focused on what we didn't have growing up that I never appreciated what we did have. A mother who would do anything for me. A home that was full of love, even if it wasn't full of things." Thomas reached across the table, taking her hand. The woman I fell in love with was proud of where she came from. Proud of working her way through college. Proud of her mother's strength. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "I want to find her again. That woman. She's still there," I said softly. "She always has been." 3 months later, Melissa and Thomas came to the opening night of my first real photography exhibition. It was a small gallery in the arts district, nothing grand, but seeing my work displayed publicly felt like a dream I'd never dared to have. "These are incredible, Mom," Melissa said, standing before a series of photographs I'd taken of elderly hands. Wrinkled, spotted, beautiful in their testament to lives fully lived. "You're really talented." "Thank you," I said, accepting the compliment without deflection, something I was still learning to do. Thomas nodded toward the entrance. "Look who else came." I turned to see Diane arriving with several of my new friends from the photography class and book club. My chosen family, supporting me alongside my biological one. Later, as the evening wound down, Melissa pulled me aside. "I have something to tell you," she said, a hint of her old excitement in her voice. "Thomas and I are expecting. You're going to be a grandmother." Joy welled up inside me. "That's wonderful news. We want you to be part of this child's life. Really part of it." Her eyes were earnest, seeking. "I don't want to repeat my mistakes. I want my child to know their history. All of it. The good and the difficult." "I'd like that very much," I said, emotion making my voice unsteady. As we stood together, surrounded by my photographs, images capturing both beauty and truth, I realized we'd both been transformed by the painful journey we'd taken. The mirror that had been broken between us was slowly being pieced back together, not perfectly, not without visible cracks, but whole enough to reflect something real. Melissa was learning to embrace her true story rather than hiding behind a fabricated one. And I was learning that it's never too late to reclaim forgotten parts of yourself, to build a life that's rich and meaningful on your own terms. The path forward wouldn't be without its challenges. Old habits and hurts don't disappear overnight. But for the first time in years, I felt true hope for our relationship. Not based on fantasy or wishful thinking, but on the solid ground of honesty. As I looked around the gallery at my photographs, at my daughter, at the life I was building at 68 years old, I felt a profound sense of peace. The greatest gift I had given Melissa wasn't financial security or social standing. It was resilience. The ability to face hard truths and begin again. And now she was giving that gift back to me.